And welcome, everybody. Dustin Harris hanging out with you in the podcast chair. A little different background today. I am broadcasting from home. Long story that I'll just save you all the details and just say this is the best way to do this today. So this worked best for me and for my guest, mostly for me. My guest was much more flexible than I could be here in the next couple of weeks. But I thought this was an important topic, and so here we are. The quality is going to be a little bit reduced, probably a lot reduced from what it normally is. I don't have my normal mic. I don't have my normal studio. I've got a little bit of background noise out here, so put up with me. A little glare on the face, a little glare on the head. I know everybody rolled their eyes when I said the word face. You know what I meant. But I want to welcome you and remind you that we are sponsored by three great companies. Of course, a la mode. A la mode's coming out with Titan very, very soon. So hold on to your hats. Going to be very different, very a new thing. We'll just put it that way, a new thing for a la mode. I'll be having a couple guys on my program here very, very soon to talk about Titan. But right now you can go to alamode.com and learn more. That's alamode.com. Of course, we're sponsored by DataMaster. DataMaster is the program that I use when I can to import all of the information from the tax sheets, from the MLS, the comps directly into my a la mode software. And it can go into any software that you are using on your side. Check them out right now. Go to datamasterfreetrial.com/coach. Once again, it's datamasterfreetrial.com/coach. And finally, we are sponsored by Working RE magazine. Folks, I was just on Working RE this morning. I got an email, clicked on it, read a great article. I love that about Working RE. I can know what's going on in the industry. You can too. Go to workingre.com. Again, it's workingre.com. Well, folks, we're going to talk about a very, very important topic, and brought on an expert in the appraisal world, a guy that's been on with us several times, a good friend of mine, Mr. Tim Andersen from Florida. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Dustin, thank you very kindly. It's always a pleasure to be with you, and my best to your family.
Well, you know, this is kind of a switch. See, I'm sitting outside, and you're sitting inside your studio. Yet you're in sunny Florida, and I'm in the blistery cold of Idaho, right?
Well, if you're in the blistery cold of Idaho, I'm in the infernal heat of Florida in September. So yes, I'm inside my house, inside the air conditioning, with a cold drink just by my left hand. Yeah.
There you go. Well, Tim, I appreciate you joining me today. As you know, there's been a lot of talk over the last couple months, really over the last couple of years, but it's really heated up on the blogosphere, among the appraisers that I rub shoulders with. And I have to say, sometimes this topic comes out a little bit in a fear-based mode, and that's really why I wanted to have you on today. Is maybe calm our fears just a little bit. The topic on the table today is big data, and specifically, I think the fear around big data is that. Well, I hear this a lot. You know, the appraiser eventually is going to be replaced by algorithms. The appraiser is going to be replaced by computer programs. The appraiser is going to go the way of the buggy whip makers. And Tim, what are your initial thoughts on that when you hear an appraiser say, "Hey, you know, it's only a matter of time"?
Okay, Dustin, let's look at any kind of change, and let's use the example of buggy whip makers. In 1890, there was a whole lot of work for buggy whip makers. In 1910, 20 years later, there wasn't very much work for buggy whip makers. Now, let's face it, there are nostalgia buffs, that there are Western movies still being made and Western TV shows, and people still, you know, on their ranch want to get around with a horse and buggy. So yeah, there's still demand for buggy whips. But let's face it, you're not going to make a living making buggy whips. Somebody else may be, but they also make something else, and they probably do it by computer in a manufacturing facility.
Right.
So when we talk about big data, is there something there to fear? Yes, there is something there to fear. Is there something there to use? Yes, there's something there to use. Is there something there with which we need to be comfortable? Yes, there's something there with which we need to be comfortable. Are algorithms going to replace appraisers? That question, Dustin, is too late to ask. It already has. Look at what Fannie and Freddie have recently done. They have basically said, we have enough faith in our internal systems that for certain appraisals, under certain circumstances, we are not going to use appraisers. We are going to look to our own data. We're going to shake our own chicken bones. We're going to throw our own snake entrails. and we're going to come up with a number. So appraisers, you don't have to do that. Well, for good or ill, some small minority of appraisers, or I should say some small minority of the work appraisers have been doing, have been replaced by algorithms. So that is not a fear of something that is going to happen in the future. We need to move past that. We don't need to fear that any longer. We need to move past that's happened.
We're there. Okay.
Yep.
So the step further that I would go on this is that I think appraisers, sure, let's accept the inevitable. Let's say that in some small, as you said, minority of cases, our work has been, quote unquote, replaced by the computer. I guess the bigger fear is that, am I going to have a job in 5 years? Am I going to have a job in 10 years? And, there's a lot of, well, I use the word fear purposely. I think there's a lot of fear out there among appraisers on whether or not their job is going to last. What do you think about that, Tim? I mean, should we be fearful? Or do you think that there's another way to look at this?
Dustin, there's nothing wrong with fear as a short-term motivator. When your children are small, you tell them, don't run out into traffic. Don't talk to strangers. Okay? Fear is perfectly fine. As we get older, however, and we come to understand what's going on, we have to look at something different. Now, let's go back to big data. And first of all, I don't like the term big data. It's very descriptive, but I think it's unnecessarily pejorative. All big data means is someplace out there in a central location, there is a whole lot of information that a whole lot of people, assuming they have the capacity, can take advantage of. That's all it means. Most appraisers already use big data. They just don't know they use big data. Okay. But every time they tap into an MLS system, they're using big data because there is not a single appraiser out there who has the time, the money, the education, the capacity, etc., to amass and manipulate and maintain and gather all of that data. They have to go someplace else. They have to buy it. They go to MLS. So appraisers already use big data. I don't see why appraisers get so bent out of shape about the term. Since they're already familiar with it, they already use it every day in almost every appraisal they do. It's the MLS system. Now, are there other big data systems out there that are bigger than the MLS system? Of course there are. But appraisers already use big data every time they tap into their MLS system.
Okay, I think that's fair, and I think that's a good framing. But you and I both know, let me push a little bit further. You and I both know that the fear is not so much in using or not using big data. It's in the being replaced by big data. Is there a day coming down the road, years down the road maybe, that we as appraisers are looking for another job, or that our job changes so dramatically that it looks nothing like it does today?
Yes, without question.
Okay.
Let's face it, Dustin, let's face it, your father, if I recall your history correctly, was an appraiser.
Yes, he was.
And he did things differently than you do.
Yes.
So appraising changes. I remember my first mentor, rest his soul, used a typewriter up until literally the day before he died. And he was like 86 years old when he died. And he typed his reports by hand. Now, the reports went to the administrative staff and they word processed them and put the pictures in and all the modern stuff. But he would not have a computer terminal on his desk. No way. So he typed his reports by hand. Well, okay, that's fine. The point is, we have gone from rolling green monsters into our typewriters to word processing, to digital photographs, to mapping programs, to programs into which we put data and then the program itself writes our own reports, to sending our reports overseas to be typed. We are progressing. We are not where we were 5 years ago. We are not where we were 10 years ago. So when we talk about fear, when we talk about big data, okay, there's nothing wrong with being afraid of it in the sense of you respect it. But you and I both know that once you've mastered something, once you've come to understand what composes it, Your fear turns into respect. And then you can use what it is you feared.
Okay. I'm gonna challenge you on a word you used just a minute ago. You said we are progressing, but there is an argument out there that big data, if you will, and I'm not talking about MLS. I'm talking about moving to those algorithms that come up with the value, if you will. That many appraisers say, no, that's a regression because you're now taking the human being out of the element of analysts. And so, thoughts on that?
Okay, Dustin, here is what I say to that. You're right. It is. It is, in effect, a regression because you have taken human beings out of the picture, sort of. And this is what we have to remember. The whole purpose of big data is not to come up with a value. The whole purpose of big data is to use as a tool to come up with value. Now, one of the shortcomings of big data is it cannot distinguish between price and value. But yet it is the appraiser's challenge, it is the appraiser's job to distinguish between price and value. And while the definition of market value is written in the in the context of price. In other words, it says market value is the most probable price. Then if you look further down in the definition of market value, what it says is, but there are certain conditions which have to be met. And for example, one of those conditions is the financing. Was there anything funky about the financing that is going to artificially inflate the price? If there is, the appraiser has to take it out. So the appraiser forms an opinion of market value, not an opinion of price. And that's all an AVM will do, form an opinion of price. Therefore, the appraiser, the indispensable appraiser, gets involved to say, okay, the machine says that house is worth $293,846.15. All right. Now, I've got to go back and I've got to verify with the buyer, the seller, the whomever, to make sure that in 5 comparable sales that I choose randomly, there's no funky financing, the place wasn't trashed at sale, the place wasn't haunted, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I've dealt with haunted properties.
Okay.
I have some experience.
I didn't realize that was a check and a balance that an appraiser had to do. But.
Okay, but that's part of verification. Now, it's a shame that USPAP does not define to verify. If you go out into the world and you look up the definition of verification, it basically means to ascertain the truth of. Okay. And USPAP uses the word verify. It does not use the word confirm. So it is our job to go out and verify the data to make sure that what the machine tells us, which is price, is translated into value, which is our job. And assuming we do our jobs correctly, we will have a job, and that will be to interpret price into value.
Okay, so let me talk about 2 things I want to hit before we go to the break, and then I'll just set this up, Tim, just so you kind of get a path of where I want to go here. I want to talk about 2 scary things, if you will, and then when we get back to the break, I want to get to more down to earth, and that is I want to talk about where we go from here, what an appraiser is to do, given the landscape and given the projections and given where the path that we're going on. What should an appraiser be doing currently? But again, I want to do that after the break. First of all, I want to talk about early 2000s. You used the term AVM. That was a scary term in the early 2000s. As you know, it didn't last. A lot of these lenders started going to these models, and they very quickly learned that they didn't work. What is different now, today, with the fear centered around big data, AVMs, that's different than what happened, say, 18 years ago?
Okay. Dustin, are you the same now as you were 18 years ago?
Oh yeah, I weigh the same. I've got the same amount of hair. Oh, wait a second.
And let's see, Dustin, you have a very loose relationship with the truth, obviously, too.
Hey, I'm an appraiser.
Okay.
What can I say?
Oh, okay. All right. I thought you were going to say you were an attorney. Anyway, never mind. Okay. Okay. My dad was an attorney, and that's one of the reasons he got out of practicing law, because he wanted to be able to tell the truth.
All right.
Okay. 18. Let's look at Zillow. Now, I'm neither nor an opponent of Zillow. It's there. Okay. Now, 18 years ago, Zillow may not have existed, but assuming it did, 18 years ago, Zillow data, it had some really fabulous mathematical algorithms, and the algorithm said, well, yeah, that house ought to sell for $285,000. Okay, well, what happened was Zillow said, okay, this is what the model says, and then 3 months later, they had the sale. So they were able to compare the sale with their model. Now, over 18 years, they have taken all of those sales for properties that have been listed listed with realtors and run through Zillow. So they are now able to compare that house over there that it said would sell for $500,000 really sold for only $400,000. And it can factor that change into its algorithm. In other words, the algorithm can say, whoops, I kind of screwed the pooch on that one. Better figure out what the problem is and fix it.
Right.
So as a result, because of sales, the algorithms have become more intuitive. Zillow likes to say its error rate has gone from 14% to 4%. Well, okay, there are some problems with that. We're not going to get into it. But the point is, if you were doing merely the algorithms to come up with what the property should have sold for, and then 5 years later, you've got not only your algorithm, but what it indeed sold for, and you can compare them, and you can figure out how to account for those differences, then your ability to predict price, not value, your ability to predict price gets better. And that's basically what has happened. Artificial intelligence, which is what ABMs basically are, have become more intuitive. The databases have become larger. And as a result, those who provide quote unquote big data have been able to make their databases and therefore the output of their databases more accurate. Now, will a database, for example, I was reading something or listening to something the other day, and an appraiser was saying, well, how can a database determine if the house has been trashed? It can't. There's absolutely no way. The only way the lender can determine if the house has been trashed is to send somebody to look into it. Well, that's why banks have vice presidents, okay, or home inspectors or real estate appraisers. So the real estate appraiser goes in and says, well, yeah, had it been in typical and average condition, it would have sold for $250, but it's absolutely trashed on the inside, so maybe it's going to sell for $200. Well, okay, remember that lenders not only budget for losses, they can also insure over losses. Therefore, it doesn't bother them particularly that there is the occasional anomaly, the occasional outlier. They can handle that, okay? So when the appraiser says, well, only appraisers can go in and check and look at the condition of the house, okay, that's true. But then the appraiser has been changed from an appraiser into a home inspector. And I'm not dumping on home inspectors. That's not the point.
No, it's a different role.
But it's a different role for which we are not trained. Okay. So assuming you've got a typical house in a typical subdivision, then chances are the algorithm is going to do a pretty good job of coming up with a reasonable price. Now, when you're out of the typical subdivision, when you're not dealing with cookie cutters, up in the panhandle of Idaho, you've got all sorts of houses up there that are just humongous that people use as summer homes. Well, let's face it, there aren't that many of them that sell every year. So chances are the algorithm isn't going to really do you much good when you go to Jackson Hole or wherever to appraise some 7,500 square foot McMansion. that some Hollywood type uses 3 months a year. Okay, fine. It doesn't. The human has to get involved there. But yet the human can still look at what the algorithm says and go, ooh, no, no, that's not even close.
Yeah.
Or the human could say, okay, that's a good place to start. But the point is, when you set this thing up, you said we were looking at big data success and asparagus. But we'll get to the asparagus by the time we finish.
I can't wait.
But the point is, the appraiser defines success. And let's face it, you're up with a McMansion near Jackson Hole with 8,500 square feet, and they imported the marble from Italy and blah 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 blah. No, you're not going to get an algorithm there, but yet you might feel really successful in your value opinion if you find 5 sales throughout 3 states that are similar to that property that you can use as comparable sales. So when we're talking about success doesn't mean you get the number, quote unquote, right. If you look at the Fannie Mae form, it doesn't ask you to get the number right. It merely asks you to be accurate. So you may not be real happy with your number, but it may be a very successful number because you developed it credibly.
Okay. Yeah, that's a key word. Okay. So Tim, when we get back from the break, I want to talk about asparagus. I want to talk about where we as appraisers go from here. And I think you've got some, you and I talked off the air, I think you've got some important insight there. But before we get there, I want to talk about some other important insight, and that is being more efficient as a real estate appraiser. What type of insight, appraisers, do you have into your own business and being able to do more with less? We're talking about that today, taking data and being able to, as an appraiser, look at that data objectively and be able to make decisions. The analytical side is much, much different than just taking the data itself. But as Tim pointed out, you got to have the data in the first place. That's where DataMaster comes in. Folks, if you're not using DataMaster, please go on their website, go to datamasterusa.com and check and see if they are in your area. If they are, folks, I don't know what you're waiting for. It is not a cost. It is an investment. The ability to save 30 to 60 minutes per report. If they are in your area, go to your browser, type in datamasterfreetrial.com/coach. Again, it's datamasterfreetrial.com/coach, and check them out for 14 days free. That's right, folks. Unlimited downloads. Check them out. I promise you will not turn back once you find out what DataMaster can do for you. Speaking of software programs that can do a lot for you and allow you to be able to be more efficient as a real estate appraiser, have you checked out Alamode? Folks, if you're using any other software out there, I implore you to check out Alamode. There's a reason that they are the leader, not a leader, the leader in the industry. It's because they've been in business for over 30 years. It's because they care about the appraiser. It's because they're constantly refining and allowing their tools to help you to be better at what you do. And very, very soon, we're going to see Titan come out. That's the ability to work from wherever you have an internet connection. Check them out right now. Go to alamode.com. Again, it's alamode.com, or you can call them at 800-ALAMODE. I talked earlier about the fact that I was on workingre.com this morning reading about the appraisal industry. We're talking about the future of appraisal industry. If you care about your profession, folks, check them out. Go to workingre.com. I know you get the magazine. You get it once a quarter, and I love the magazine. It's what I read when I fly, which is too often, as my wife says. But when I want to know what's going on now in the appraisal industry, I go to workingre.com. Sign up for their free email. When something big comes, they will send you an email and they will let you know, and you can click on that and read more. Again, it's workingre.com. Once more, workingre.com. And folks, we are back. We're with Tim Andersen out of Florida. Tim, thanks again for making time today.
Oh, Dustin, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, it's always a pleasure for me to have you on as well. I consider you a good friend, and you're very knowledgeable in the industry as a whole, in what it means to be an appraiser. Of course, you are a USPAP instructor. You're an MAI, right? SAR.
MAI.
Yeah, you are.
MAI.
Yeah.
MAI. Mm-hmm.
Very good.
Marginally active intellectually, according to my wife.
All right, fair enough. We'll go with that. Before the break, Tim, we were talking a little bit about the he who shall not be named, Zillow, and it's a bad word around the appraisal forums, I know, But there's a little bit of this fear that's coming from appraisers, and you pointed out, and I've said this before. Fear is a great motivator, but it's a poor problem solver. I think fear is good to allow us to wake up and say, where are things going? What do I need to find out? Where do I need to go? I think it's a poor problem solver in the fact that if we do everything by fear, we will end up in trouble. We're working off of emotions there rather than real data, and we're talking about data today, Tim. So talk to us. What's an appraiser to do? Where am I to go? What shall I do? Do I hang up my my clipboard and pen and look for something else?
Dustin, I would hope not, frankly. Let's face it, we talk about keeping up with technology. We can't. That is no longer appropriate. We have to be in front of the technology. We can't really keep up with it. We've got to be in front of it. And if we can access big data other than MLS, and right now, quite frankly, that's expensive, I'll concede that point. As we can access big data, as we can manipulate, instead of 3 or 4 sales, when we can manipulate 30 or 40 or 300 or 400 sales, right. We get a complete picture of what it is the market's doing. Now, if you look at Standard Rule 1-4, it says the appraiser will collect, verify, and analyze all information necessary for credible assignment results. Well, if there are 3 or 4 sales available, and that's it, then 3 or 4 sales compose all information necessary. If, however, there are 30 or 40 sales that are available, then the appraiser, according to USPAP, has to amass data on those 30 or 40 sales and use those to come up with a credible value opinion. And let's face it, 3 or 4 you can do with a pencil and a legal pad and a calculator. Okay. But once you get to 30 or 40 or 300 or 400, you've got to have some kind of program, either something in your own computer or you're using somebody else's computer, where you can manipulate and work all of those data. Now, I'm not going to go into a discussion of statistics because this is not the place of it. But statistics is the only way to manipulate, learn from, and interpret what a great deal of data mean.
Okay.
And 3 or 4 sales, okay, legal pad, pencil, calculator, fine. But 30 or 40 or 300 or 400, nope, that's got to be done statistically. You've got to understand what the statistics mean. You've got to understand what it is the program does with those data. And then you've got to look at the output and say, okay, I like this, and I like that, and I like this, and I like that. I don't like this, and therefore I'm going to scrub that data point, and I'm going to reanalyze the data. Fortunately, there are programs that will do that for you. Unfortunately, they're not inexpensive. But you can take a great deal of data, and you can ask certain programs to manipulate it in all sorts of ways that give you all sorts of pictures of what's going on.
Okay. So I hear you saying 2 things, and really they're the same thing. They're just sub parts of the same thing. But what I hear you saying is we as appraisers need to be aware that the landscape is changing. And the second part of that is that we don't fear that change, but we embrace the change. Am I hearing you saying, hey, let's not run from big data, let's actually utilize big data?
Well, Dustin, what's that saying in the Army? Lead, follow, or get out of the way. You say the landscape is changing. Well, in that, yes, I agree with you. But in that statement, there is a certain passivity. We need to be changing the landscape.
Okay, all right.
Not just watching it change.
Yeah.
We need to be changing the landscape. And part of the way we change the landscape is maintaining our skills, obtaining new skills, and staying in front of, insofar as possible, technological changes. And if that means spending the money to get the education, spending the money to get the programs, spending the money to buy the data that the programs can manipulate, then yes, either we are going to do that, either individually or collectively somehow, and the MLS does really a pretty good job of that, frankly, or we are going to pull out our leather cutters and start making buggy whips.
All right. So this is good. I mean, this gives us hope, Tim. I think the fear mongering. I shouldn't say fear mongering. The fear that exists, and it's a real life thing. I tend to be. Some people call me an eternal optimist. I don't know that I'm an optimist so much as I'm kind of a realist with a bent on the positivity of a situation. But one of the things that's made you and I successful over the years, and appraisers across the nation, is that we embrace technology, we embrace new things, we embrace tools. We say, okay, what can I do with this thing? And what you're saying, Tim, at least what I hear you saying, boiled down, is let's embrace. I mean, big data is here to stay, right? Let's embrace it. Let's show our clients why it is they would want to use not just big data and replace appraisers, but appraisers in combination with big data seems like a lot better way to go.
That's how I see the future, Dustin. Big data in combination with the well-trained mind of a well-trained appraiser. That's where I see appraisal going. Now, am I right? I don't have a clue, but that's where I see the industry going. It is not going to. It's not going to stay the same. It can't. There is no such thing as the status quo simply because time passes. Okay, so we're either going to embrace big data, and again, let's face it, most of us already have. We don't know it. It's called the MLS.
Right.
So we've either got to continue to embrace big data, or prepare for retirement.
Okay. Yeah, the old way of doing things, as you pointed out, the old way of 3 or 4 comps, making some adjustments, putting your map in, and sending that off to the client, I think are if not already gone, they're going. And it's a matter of taking this big data and incorporating new skills. I wrote, or I guess it was a podcast I put out a couple of weeks ago. And I really appreciate your feedback on that, by the way. I asked the question, is the appraiser a statistician or an analyst? And you rightfully pointed out, we're both.
Oh, yeah. We are urban analysts, and I don't mean to denigrate those who work in rural areas. What I'm saying is it is our data. It is our job to take the data from the urban area in which we live, even if it's a suburban or rural area, and analyze them. And one of the ways we do that, one of the simple, fast, straightforward ways we do that, is via statistics. And Excel has a wonderful built-in statistical program. There's a program called Minitab, which is rather expensive, is excellent at manipulating data. Our mutual friend, Josh Wallet, has a wonderful program out there for taking data from MLS and analyzing it. There's a gentleman in Tennessee, Dave Braun, who has a very sophisticated program. It's a little bit more oriented toward commercial work, but has a sophisticated program that allows you to manipulate data quickly and easily. Most MLS programs have the capacity to help you manipulate data. In other words, it'll say, okay, what's the typical days on market in this neighborhood for this type of house over the last 6 months? And you push a button and bam, there's the answer.
I want
that's a little. Yeah,
go ahead. No, please.
I was going to say the MLS is a little black boxy because you don't really know what goes into it. But the point is, it's there. It's a tool. Use it.
Right. Okay. So one thing that I wanted to not challenge you on, but help to understand, because I think some of the listeners might bristle a little bit at the word manipulation. It has a negative context that we somehow are changing or pushing our agenda. Describe what you mean by manipulation, because I know that's not what you mean.
Okay, I'm using manipulation more in the statistical sense, meaning you take the same data, but you look at it in another way. For example, if you know what a scatter plot is, you'll know that on the scatter plot, there's a graph, and all the individual sales prices are plotted on the plot, and then a regression line is drawn. Well, you might have 75 of those sales. What you do is you take a look at that and you go, oh, look, at the 75 sales, 10 of them aren't near the regression line at all.
Right.
They're
Okay.
outliers. So let me manipulate the data by removing those outliers and then redoing this analysis.
Gotcha.
That's what I mean by manipulate. I don't mean, oh, well, I'm going to cherry pick the data. No,
Right.
that's
Okay,
most
good.
definitely not what I mean. And if I implied that, I'm sorry.
No, not at all.
But no,
you did not. I just wonder, sometimes we hear that word and that's what we imply. And I knew where you were going with that.
One of the reasons I like Minitab is because Minitab does that automatically. It goes through and it takes out one sale and recalculates everything, and then two sales and recalculates everything, and three sales and recalculates everything. And it'll go through 100,000 iterations in 5 seconds.
Nice.
And give you all these printouts. And then you can say, oh, well, this one, all of the data are different, but they're all centering on $235,000. Okay, go with that. All right, that's what I mean by manipulate the data.
Okay.
But again, I'm not trying to sell Minitab. That's not the point. I know that happens to be one of the programs that will do that type of analysis.
Okay, good. So anybody that clicked on this podcast has been waiting with bated breath, and I use that term purposefully. For what in the hell does big data have to do with asparagus? So as we close up,
okay,
please tell us why we.
I'm talking about big data and success. Now, my wife and I both love to cook, and if you could be in my house right now, you would smell the most wonderful odor of barbecue, because my wife is preparing a absolutely gorgeous cut of meat for a barbecue we're having this afternoon.
Nice.
So she's a superb cook, bordering on a chef, and to her, success is a restaurant quality meal, and the vast majority of the time she's successful. Now, I love to cook, but for me, success is my guests do not run from the table retching, and that I have prepared a vegetable, usually asparagus, because it's simple to fix. All right. So we both have a definition of success. They just happen to differ. Now, with big data, you might be able to say, oh, look, big data says this house is worth $237,000, and I've done the analysis, and I think it's worth $237,000 too. Therefore, using big data, you were successful in coming up with a value opinion. Whereas you use big data and it uses a sale that was trashed. Therefore, because big data assumes a neighborhood average or neighborhood typical, that the property is not going to sell for anywhere near that. Therefore, using big data would not be successful. And you would take a look at that tool and you'd say, okay, for this appraisal, nope, I'm not going to do that. So you get to define your success with big data. Big data lets you define your success. And again, my wife's definition of success is a restaurant quality meal. My definition of success is I got the vegetable to come out at the same time as the rest of the meal, and nobody got ptomaine poisoning. Mm-hmm. So big data, and again, that's just a lot of information. Let's forget the Darth Vader-ish connotation of big data. All it means is there's a whole lot of information out there, a whole lot of relevant information out there you can access, but then yes, you run it through the machine, but then you have to run that through your brain to see if it makes sense.
Very good. Very good. Tim, I was looking through the mail here while you were talking. I must have misplaced my invitation to your barbecue, but that's okay. I'll catch you next time.
Well, Dustin, we'll save you some. And,
good.
I flat guarantee you that it's going to be good.
I love it, Tim. Thank you once again, my friend. You're always so kind to volunteer your time, your knowledge, your expertise to help we appraisers understand our life, understand our profession, understand where we're going. Appraisers, don't fear. Going forward, there's a lot that we can do to remain relevant in today's world. Tim Andersen, thank you.
Thank you, Dustin, and to all of our friends in Houston. Thank you for surviving. You're an example to the rest of us.
Absolutely.
And don't mess with Texas.
I love it, my friend. I love it. I've got a lot of appraisers friends down in Texas, and I echo that sentiment as well. Folks, it's a new world. It's a different world that we live in, and it will continue to change. Some appraisers will go out of business. Some appraisers will say, I like my typewriter, and I'll continue to do that, and that's fine. Those of us who can kind of see where things are going and are willing to make some changes, I think will not only survive but thrive. Thanks for joining us today, folks, and we will, of course, catch you next time.